A story has been doing the rounds that there has been a secret tariff deal that has been reached between United States and China. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I'm going to tell you what the numbers are that are being bandied about and how much is going to be the amount of concessions that China is giving to the United States and how many concessions is the United States giving to China. All that stuff is in this, but the sticking point even for that secret deal is that the United States is putting a 20% tariff on China extra on top of everything that is there for its control on fentanyl. So I'm going to give you a small slide deck that talks about the role of India as a route for things to move from China to the West, as well as the help that US expects from India also to try and curb this thing. Because today, fentanyl may not be widespread in India, but it could very well happen tomorrow. That is the thing. India should also crack down on those people who are trying to peddle this. Last word on this will be coming very soon. Big names are involved, and watch out for what kind of revelations come from Chennai. So let's wait and see on that one. So let's take a look at what is China doing. First of all, they would not even accept that fentanyl was coming from their shores to America. I think now that realization has passed. Now they've accepted that. So what has happened is that China has finally agreed to crack down on chemicals used to make fentanyl, the drug killing thousands in the US. Just to give you an idea, the numbers are around 77,000 a year. That's a lot of people dying from fentanyl usage. China announced that it will place 2 key fentanyl precursor chemicals, 4-piperidone and 1-BOC4-piperidone, under strict regulation as class 2 controlled substances, meaning that these will be monitored on their way out from China. These chemicals are used in the synthesis of fentanyl, the opioid responsible for hundreds of thousands of overdose deaths in the US. One problem that is facing the youth of United States is that they are being fed fentanyl, not in its pure form. The pure form will kill you instantly, but as a mix of other drugs that unfortunately students are taking, because in competitive schools, you have to have the highest grade, otherwise you don't get counted when it comes to the marketplace. So what I'm hearing is that countries like Mexico, as well as labs in Canada, or even perhaps even inside the United States itself, they are mixing a very popular prescription drug called Adderall. Adderall is supposed to be prescribed only to attention deficit students, ADHD syndrome. But what has happened is people have been told that if you get on to Adderall, their cognition power goes up. So students typically appear to be using that before the exam so that they can ace their exams. But then there is a downtime after that, how they weather this, and then if there is another exam the next day, how do they get back up and go? The problem now is that it's not the Adderall alone that is causing the damage, but instances of Adderall being mixed with fentanyl are being given in tablets, and these are all illegal substances because these are prescription drugs. So these are being sold illegally in the market, and US is cracking down on that. But this is how the youth in America are trying to be wiped out. That's how I see it. The new controls, such as on the piperidone, will be taken into effect on the 20th of July next month. How did this decision come about? There was a high-level meeting between China's Public Security Minister Wang Xiaohong and US Ambassador David Perdue in Beijing. That's what started it off. Then it went to other countries, and Luckney got involved. And I'll, again, like I said, I'll tell you about this secret understanding that has been reached between China and the United States in just a minute. The move was widely interpreted as a goodwill gesture, and hopefully the tense situation that ensued between US and China will now taper down. China has labeled its decision as independent, but acknowledged that it has aligned with the United Nations Drug Convention. In earlier negotiations, the US had imposed 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, citing fentanyl as a major concern. Now, what we are hearing is the general tariffs have since dropped to 55%. there is an extra 20% link tariff that remains in place. I'm not clear if it is 55 plus 20 or it is 35 plus 20. To get that clarity, I'll come to that on what I have understood from the secret deal that has been mentioned in whispers. In fact, President Trump mentioned that in one of his press conferences also. So I'm going to give you that. So again, this 20%, in my opinion, in my calculation, is on top of whatever the number that will be agreed, because US wants to make absolutely sure not a milligram of anything that can be going into the building of fentanyl can leave the shores of China. Then you can ask me, what about Myanmar? What about some other country? What if it comes from there? Well, China is a bigger problem for the United States to handle. The other countries, eventually, these things also will come under control. Let's just wait for how things play out. Now, the next thing is, in China's chemical crackdown is likely intended to ease trade restrictions and resume economic normalization. Everything is revolving around fentanyl. If fentanyl is solved, a lot of things, a lot of other things will fall in place between US and China. And like I said, just wait till the end and I'll give you the secret deal's main points, if you will. China insists the US fentanyl crisis is a domestic issue rooted in prescription drug abuse and lack of regulation. This is their side. Fentanyl is a United States problem, not China's, said Foreign Ministry spokesperson 𝗟𝗏𝗄𝗏. Despite criticism, China says it's one of the strictest countries in the world on narcotics control. Then, to prove that, they give you all these statistics that in 2025, they arrested 262 individuals for drug smuggling, seizing 2.42 tons of narcotics, and prosecuted 1,300 individuals while arresting over 700 for money laundering linked to drug crimes. In 2024, a top narcotics official, Liu Yuzhen, received a suspended death sentence for taking over $17 million in bribes between 1992 and 2020. Let me tell you what really happens in China, because I've had discussions with a friend of mine who was in semiconductor business. And this is about 10 years old, but leopards don't change their spots. So what he used to say was that no matter what kind of an agreement you reach with the Chinese government, at a local level, there is still corruption of a massive nature. For example, a chip company which has its design control in the United States gives it to China for manufacturing. 100% you can expect that these chips will be copied and enhanced and sold back into the market, and they start competing with the original design. These kind of things happen. So what this company used to try and do was to bribe the officials of the local city where the manufacturing places were to try and crack down on this kind of behavior. This is something that a person who has experienced this for a long time said, and still, things are going on. That's why you see that semiconductor global crackdown that happened even during Biden's time, and that is going to still continue. China is going to have the effects of not getting the latest device tools and as well as the latest expertise in making the latest technology chips. That's going to continue. There was also a phone call between Trump and Xi where trade and fentanyl cooperation were discussed, and a potential meeting between the two could happen sometime this year, for example, at the APEC summit in Seoul. That's one possibility. Now, as part of the crackdown on fentanyl, the United States has sanctioned 3 Mexican financial institutions such as Citibanco, Intercam Banco, and Vector Casa de Bolsa. See, this means that they have actually traced some of the payments for these things to these banks, and these banks are also now under sanctions. These entities were accused of facilitating payments to Chinese chemical suppliers. Sanctions under the Fend Off Fentanyl Act will block these firms from accessing US financial system. So there is a big price to pay for the Mexican firms. What has happened is in the last 10 years, the trafficking of drugs has become much more complex, and new sources are being created, new transit countries are being created, new paths, new mules are being used to get the stuff across from the producer to the consumer. This is where you have the role of India and how India also needs to curb as a transit route what is happening, because first it starts out as a transit route, but soon India will also become a consumer, and that will follow with deaths of complete generations. It's a huge problem. Now, because of the complexity of this network, now fentanyl producer with the original drug producers, everybody has gotten together. In fact, if you remember, part of the reason why Bitcoin is so popular is because that has become a favored method of payment between these kinds of nefarious people. And that's why, I mean, if you look at the Bitcoin business, buyer, seller, one of the counterparties is almost always China. So this tells you what is going on. There is the reality here, and I think US knows about this. If I know about it, I'm sure US knows, and their agencies know this. So there's going to be crackdown going on in that direction also. The primary direct sources of fentanyl continue to be China and Mexico. I'm going to give you some drawings on what the paths are, but unfortunately, India is now emerging as a key supplier for both finished fentanyl powder as well as fentanyl precursor chemicals, signaling a potential long-term shift in global fentanyl production and distribution patterns. Remember that 𝗤𝗏𝗍𝗍𝗍 case in Tamil Nadu? That is just a tip of the iceberg. So you can see here where the source is and where the destination is. You can see that source is China and the destinations are Mexico, Canada, and United States. And then you also have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've described it in a very longish monologue some time ago. So you can go back and look at that video to understand what these things mean. Suffice to say that this is a huge, clear, and present danger. China, I think, is finally acknowledging it, albeit reluctantly, that it is the main source of pure fentanyl and related substances, mainly through international mail, like, for example, postal service and express consignment. You know why India has emerged as one of the key transit points? It is believed that goods emanating from Indian ports is not checked as thoroughly as other countries into the United States, and that's the loophole that they are trying to exploit. Now, we have talked about the measures that were put in place in 2019. There's a separate monologue on that I've already talked about. In fact, there's another monologue about how FBI Director 𝗏𝗏𝗏 Patel said that US is collaborating with Indian law enforcement to dismantle the network that is there, the transit hub that is there in fentanyl. I think I told you about it. I think the place mentioned was Indore, and then from there it comes to Mumbai, and from Mumbai it was finding its way into other countries. And 𝗤𝗏𝗍𝗍𝗏 arrest showed you that there's also another network where the goods come in from Punjab, they leave from Tamil Nadu, and the drugs are put in as part of desiccated coconut. It looks white, and also it looks very very granular. So these are the kind of ruses that are used to try and smuggle drugs. The aim here about United States working with India is to try and prevent it from becoming a larger problem in the fentanyl trade as a transit hub. Transit hub today, tomorrow could be a consumer hub also. As things become tighter, they'll try to do this thing. By no means are these measures enough. We have to be constantly on the vigil, and there is an industry thriving. For everything, there's an industry now, and you have to make sure that the oxygen for this industry is taken out. Over 74,000 Americans died of its synthetic opioid overdoses, which means fentanyl, in 2023. There may be one or two other drugs. Patel characterizes the fentanyl epidemic as a tier 1 security threat. Tier 1. He urged India to act decisively to prevent becoming a larger part of the trafficking chain. Now, all these things come back to why is China now acknowledging fentanyl? Because I guess Chinese economy is on its knees and they need the complete access to the Western markets, because what US does today, tomorrow Europe will follow. So they are afraid that whatever little trade that they are having, even that will go up in smoke. I promised you that there was a secret deal that was negotiated between US and China. And China is very tight-lipped about it, but wonder why United States is not talking about it, except saying that a deal has been signed. So my information, and you can check it out, it's available on YouTube, by way of various commentators, is that China has made three major concessions to United States, and the United States has made one major concession to China. What are these concessions? The first one is that China is going to allow reciprocal market access to US companies. Big deal. For example, Facebook, X, YouTube, all these videos can now be seen inside China. These are all banned right now. Number one. This is just one part, and there are many other things. For example, financial institutions from US can sell their products in China. Second one is to level the playing field, which means that, see, US companies have a certain set of regulations and restrictions, whereas Chinese companies get extra leg up, like a handicap in a race. In a 100-meter race, US will be starting from the 0-meter line, but Chinese companies might be starting from the 20-meter line. That is going to be taken away. Everybody is going to have the same level playing field. This is concession number two. Concession number three is that China will not use rare earth materials as a political pawn. So this is explicitly, I think the wording is now mentioned into the agreement. So what is the one concession that US is giving to China? It is saying that it will bring down tariffs to 20%. My gut feeling is that 20% is not inclusive of the extra 20% overhead because of fentanyl. I think US will monitor how well China manages to completely tamp down and, in fact, shut down all fentanyl production within its own places, whether it is precursors or finished product, and only then that will go up. So that will be taken away, which means my calculations is that even if this trade deal becomes open, say by 20th July or something like that, the numbers would be 40% tariffs and 10% from China on US goods. This is where things stand now. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Namaskar.